Nashville. Go there and learn more. Do that today. 11-year NFL veteran involved for life, Ramon Foster, Jonathan Schaefer, Jason Martin. Ramon excited about the possibilities of Baker Mayfield in Pittsburgh.
Jason, I know what kind of car you drive. Know what kind of car you drive.
When Buck gets here, it'll be a Ford. You can get his. Can't touch more. To the Mark Spain Real Estate Hotline we go. Ian Eagle with CBS Westwood One's with us on the line. Ian, good morning.
Hey, JMart Ramon. Good to talk to you guys.
So Ian, I don't know if you realize this. I was telling Mon this during the break. You're kind of the kiss of death for the state of Tennessee when it comes to the postseason because you called Titans Bengals and you managed to call Vols Michigan. How do you feel about that?
Yes, this is a really slippery slope in life, as you know. The part of the equation that you have to be very hyper aware of is what kind of effect do you have on other people in life. And my goal has always been to brighten people's day and to be a positive force, to be someone that people are excited to meet or see or listen to. And obviously, right now I'm on a cold streak.
Well, it was a good game. At least it was a good game. The tournament's been a lot of fun so far. We'll get your thoughts overall on it. But Tennessee, Michigan specifically, that was competitive pretty much throughout. You had lead changes. Either team could have won it. Like that's kind of what you want as a broadcaster.
It is. And look, I go back just a couple of years ago where I was the toast of the town. I was not going to buy a drink in Nashville when the Tennessee Titans defeated the Baltimore Ravens in the playoffs. And a jump pass from Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill playing like a Hall of Famer. And I just recognize this is how it works in the industry. I got to accept it. I got to accept. One day I'm high, and the next day I'm low. So today is the low day. Yeah, it was a fun game. It was really competitive. And I must say, going into the game, I really thought Tennessee had a chance to be a Final Four team. I liked the makeup of that squad. I liked the versatility of their roster. I liked the savviness and maturity of the freshmen. And down the stretch, they just didn't execute well. They didn't have a whole lot of answers for Hunter Dickinson. We know that Michigan had been through a roller coaster ride of a season, and the roller coaster was actually on the upswing late in that game where Tennessee could not generate offense and couldn't get a stop when needed. So if you're asking me if I was surprised, I was very surprised. I thought Tennessee had the look of one of the premier teams in the nation.
All right, and as far as calling that game, Michigan jumped out early, and Tennessee battled back. But for you being someone to call the game, it had to be exciting because it was, I think, by the middle of the second half, about 11 lead changes at that point.
Yeah, it was a lot of juice. And doing games in Indianapolis, it's a great sports town, as we know, basketball town in particular. And they showed up. The fans were there day one, game one. Jim Spinarkle and I looked at one another, and we've been doing this together 24 years in the NCAA tournament, and realized that this was going to be different than some of the other sites. I'm not going to besmirch other towns, but usually it takes a little while for the fans to get into it. This was not the case in Indianapolis. They were ready for action. I think just people were excited that the format was back to where it was. Last year's tournament was very odd. It was great to have it, and we crowned a champion, and Baylor won the title, and there's no asterisk. But it was a pseudo bubble, and it was different. It was just a very different experience. This year felt like the real thing. And I just think people came back with a lot of gusto and joy to be at the NCAA tournament. Yeah, Michigan, no one ever doubted their talent. It just was it was a weird year, and the Juwan Howard situation, as we know, in Madison, the melee with the assistant coach, and the line of congratulations at the end of the game that turned into something more. It did affect their team, and it may have affected their team in a positive way, which is crazy to say. But I do think they banded together, and there's a sense of togetherness and cohesiveness that maybe had not quite been there prior to that.
There have been some good images in this tournament, but to your point about Juwan, and we talked about, look, that's the lows, but the high would be the flip side of Kennedy Chandler getting emotional after that game and just sobbing, weeping into Juwan Howard, and Howard showing all sorts of grace and dignity in that moment. Obviously, he wanted to get to his team, but he understood that that young man was hurting. And to me, that's the image of the tournament so far, at least the one that keeps popping into my head. Not something on the floor. It was just that human moment.
Yeah, and you realize, guys, you do this every day. You're taking phone calls. You're going through topic over topic over topic, and you recognize that there is a real deep emotional connection for fans and sports, and it's often visceral.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now you go to another level when you get into the athlete's world, and some of them can stoically handle it, and others, it really hits hard. And Kennedy Chandler, that shows you how much that kid cared. And by the way, he played great. He was fantastic for Tennessee. All of his skills were on display in that game, and he was a problem for Michigan. But that moment where Juwan Howard is very much a part of Kennedy's memory of this, that he was the guy. It just happened to be timing where Chandler was starting to feel it, and who's there but Juwan Howard, the opposing coach, who was cast in such a negative light in the previous issue in Madison, and you're seeing a man's true colors in that moment. Juwan Howard's a very good man. There's competitive spirit there, and who knows what happens when things hit 10 on the scale. But you also find out about people in those kind of moments. He didn't just keep walking by. He accepted that responsibility and knew exactly what that kid needed in that exact moment.
With that being said, too, as far as what March Madness brings and the responsibility of it, well, the madness continues. St. Peter's, man, there's always a team. What have you seen from these guys, man, and how they've played in the matchups that the teams they've defeated in this tournament so far?
Ramon, they're just unflappable. Look, you've been a part of competition your whole life. So when you show up and you know that, hey, I got this, I'm just physically superior to this person, I know how to do my job better than them, and there's that vibe based on what level you're playing at. College basketball, look, we understand how it works. It's the majors, it's the mid-majors, and occasionally a mid-major can find a way, but more often than not, the major conference teams are the ones that are better equipped to go on these long runs. St. Peter's came in as a 15 seed. They were a surprise to win their conference. Iona was the clear-cut favorite under Rick Pitino, and they got clipped by Ryder early in that tournament. So St. Peter's jumps in. They had been playing their best ball of the year at the end of the season. They're not a big team. Literally, you just look at their roster. The tallest guy on their team is 6'10". He's a backup that plays about 6 minutes per game. Their center is 6'8". Their power forward, who blocks nearly three shots a game, he's 6'7". This is not the makeup of a team that you would say could go on a long run. And they just have a real strong chemistry. And their head coach, Shaheen Holloway, he's like an old school guy, man. It's tough love, but they buy in every word that he says. They hang on the edge of it, and they do as he says. They follow his lead, and his lead is toughness and grittiness. He's played in this tournament. Ironically, Jim Spinarkle and I did the game in 2000 in Buffalo when Seton Hall came back and beat Oregon in the first round, and Holloway made the game-winning shot. To go back even for us and watch some of that video, it's wild. It's 22 years ago, and now the guy is the toast of the town. He's probably going to be the head coach at Seton Hall when the smoke clears, because that's what happens when you have success. And a bunch of these guys are probably going to end up transferring somewhere, because that's where we are in college basketball. But you can't take away this moment right now. What they did to Kentucky, they completely disarmed them. They showed that they were not intimidated, and then they went toe-to-toe with them. And they were the ones in overtime that kept their wits about them. And Kentucky, I think it all kind of barreled over them, the pressure, the stress, and the tentativeness. That's what struck me the most in that game. They did not seem that like they were ready for the moment.
You do so much. And so you're calling all these games, and I know you're deep in preparation. You're looking at all these teams. You want to do the best job you can. You also cover the NFL. You also announce NFL games on a high level. And look, CBS with AFC contract means you're going to have a lot of fun this coming fall, but how are you navigating preparing for something as big as important as the NCAA tournament while all of this NFL news is all over the place? And these aren't just small moves, Ian. These are like gigantic, earth-shattering, tectonic plate-moving kind of moves.
Yeah. You know what's so funny about it? When you do the NCAA tournament and you have the 8 teams and the one day it's 4 games, and it feels like you are not connected to the rest of the world. It just feels like you're separate. So my phone has alerts like everybody else, and your phone starts lighting up. You're in the middle of the game, and it does feel like you're in a casino. You don't know what time it is outside. You don't know if it's raining, if it's sunny. You don't know what's happening outside of your little sphere. And the phone starts showing me what's going on in the NFL. And every time I'm looking down, I could be in the middle of a Murray State San Francisco game, which requires all of my concentration. I'm like, what? Did that just happen? No. And you're like looking around to other people. You know, Jim Spinarkle is next to me. He doesn't live in the NFL. He's not concerned. He doesn't care. I care, and it's hitting me in that moment where I am detached from it. But then, as I begin to process, it's insane. You're right. It was a very odd dichotomy of what was happening out in front of me, what I needed to concentrate on, and then what was happening somewhere else that was going to have a profound effect on the 2022 NFL season. Very bizarre.
What games are you actually on the call for over the next few days?
Yeah, we're in Philly, so we're continuing with this St. Peter's story. We've got St. Peter's and Purdue, and we've got North Carolina, UCLA, which, look, by the sound of it, that sounds like a Final Four game. What are you talking about? UCLA, North Carolina, 2 of the most historic programs in the country, and they're both actually playing really good basketball. UNC nearly blew that huge lead against the defending champions. Baylor came back and got back upright in overtime. And UCLA is just going about its business. Everybody was shocked last year when they emerged as an 11 seed, and this year they're a 4 seed, much better equipped with their experience to maybe go out and even win this thing. You know, I'm not sure people have looked at them in that light, but why not? You saw the first weekend of the tournament. In my mind, it's completely wide open. Gonzaga got tested. Arizona got tested. Those were the 2 teams that everybody said, oh, they could roll. Hey, they could get clipped too. That's where we're at in college basketball.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you have both St. Peter's and North Carolina, because those are the 2 most improbable things that I saw was St. Peter's still winning it when it got to overtime. Once it got to overtime, it's like, well, Kentucky's going to win it. And they didn't.
Right.
And then Baylor had all the momentum coming back from 25 down. Take it to overtime. Well, Baylor's certainly going to win it. They're defending national champions. They're battle-tested. They're a 1 seed. And they still lost. Like both the 2 teams that you would have expected to crumble in overtime are the ones that won.
Yeah. Well, it's a reminder that things in this tournament and in college basketball in general can sometimes be counterintuitive. Things that you've learned throughout your life. Okay, momentum, that's going to carry them to the finish line, and then you could flip the switch. We're still talking about 18 to 22-year-olds and how they react in the moment, how a team reacts. Baylor, as a great example, won a championship last year, and there were enough pieces that were still there, so you assumed, okay, now they've got this. And North Carolina, who literally, guys, I don't know how much of the game you saw, there was a stretch where they literally could not get the ball in bounds. Like, not just one possession, 5 straight possessions were the most fundamental part of basketball they couldn't get done, and you just thought to yourself, oh, they're cooked. They can't even do that. How are they going to win this game? How are they going to convert big baskets when necessary? So it was wild, and I think North Carolina is really believing in itself. What they did at Duke did play a big role for them in building a confidence and conviction that this was not a lost season. They were a bubble team. They were a couple losses away from not being in this thing. So now they've got a chance to really make their imprint on the tournament.
Well, Ian, have fun in Philadelphia. We're looking forward to the call and the rest of the tournament. We always appreciate catching up with you, brother. Thank you so much.
Guys.
Thank you, Ian.
I really appreciate it. I'll bounce back in Nashville, people. I'll bring some good karma. I'll find it. I'll rediscover it.
Please.
There it is. That's Ian Eagle, the great Ian Eagle of CBS and Westwood One.
That's a great point about friggin' Baylor, man. They couldn't do a very simple thing.
No, they couldn't. They could not get the ball inbounds against that defense. It was unreal. We're going straight from Iron Eagle to Andy Staples. How about them apples?
Should be interesting.
Or how about them